Hello, hello, everyone. I hope you are having an incredible Tuesday. We are back again with a super exciting session for you. My name is Daniel. I'm a part of the FI marketing team. And if you already don't know what FI is, FI is the world's largest network that helps turn ideas into fundable startups and fundable startups into global companies. So before we really get into today's session and before I introduce Saru, I just want to ask, where are you all joining us in from? I see we have someone from Montreal, we have people from Chile, Chicago, awesome, awesome, Denver, Minnesota, Hamburg, Germany, Prague, Chicago, New Orleans, Boston, UK, Ontario. Okay, a lot of people from Ontario, Tel Aviv, New York, awesome. So we have a pretty global audience, and that's what we kind of expect. And even more so with this particular topic, because it's something that's very in, and we're very, very excited to have Saroop here with us. So let me just introduce Saroop very briefly, and he can kind of uh, do a larger self introduction. So Saroop is the founder of Senso.ai. He is an AI thought leader, and he's been in the space for quite a while. So he's definitely someone who you really, really want to listen to when it comes to generative AI. Before we kind of kick things off, I just want to give you some house rules here. We have a Q&A button right under the chat button on the right side of your screen. So if you have a question for Sarup, we will bring that question up on stage and ask Sarup. So please do use the Q&A button for all your questions. If you like what Sarup is saying, you have an emoji button at the bottom of your screen. Let us know what you think. So show Sarup some love. And right at the end of this Sarup's presentation, after the Q&A, we will have a networking portion as well. So if you want to speak to Sarup, hopefully if he has time to stick around, speak to me, anybody else from the FI team, or if you want to network with other founders that we have here today at the event, you are most welcome to do so. So yeah, before we kick things off here, yeah, Sarup, do you want to introduce yourself?
Perfect. Thanks so much, Daniel. Really appreciate it. And thanks so much for being here, everyone. I'm Saroop Bharwani, and I'm the founder of a company called Senso.ai. Also a mentor at Founder Institute and Techstars. I'm a regular speaker at the University of Toronto and Queen's University on the topics of entrepreneurship and artificial intelligence. My company is focused on delivering large language model capabilities to the financial services industry. And we work with credit unions and community banks all over the US. In fact, I'm at an event right now with a network of credit unions on really kind of like deploying language models within their organization to increase productivity. A lot of the things I'll be teaching today and providing education on are things that I speak regularly to with executives in the credit union and banking space. And because this is a general purpose technology, it'll translate well throughout all fields and all domains. So these are just a few tricks that I've produced throughout the years, and just want to make it really tangible to you. And I welcome questions. So Daniel, I am sharing my screen, so if there are any questions, just feel free to stop and I'll be happy to answer that. But that's me in a nutshell. And Daniel, if it's good, I will get started.
Awesome, yeah. So just to kind of reiterate what Sarup said, if you have any questions, please pop into the Q&A section of the screen. The button's right under the chat button. So please do that and we'll bring your questions up on stage later. Sarup, over to you.
Great. So really kind of this bootcamp that I've launched in partnership with Founder Institute is really kind of a couple of objectives here. One is to educate you with the knowledge and skills of the future. Every employer that I talk to and that I hear about is starting to prioritize people that can use AI effectively and generative AI effectively. So a lot of the skills that I'm going to be demonstrating today are ones that are in very, very high demand. Particularly prompt engineering right now, which is going to be the main focus of this particular session. Two is to prepare you for the amazing possibilities and potential dangers. In the last session, I talked a lot about future possibilities. In this one, I'm going to get really tangible and talk about prompt engineering techniques. And really productivity enhancers, which is the last objective, really kind of hands-on knowledge to embed AI on your workflows. This session is going to be mainly focused on using tools like ChatGPT and Midjourney and enhance your capabilities around that beyond just a prompt input. I'm going to walk you through system prompts and how to create system prompts. My more advanced session is really focused on writing all of this in code and embedding it in your workflow so you can automate tasks. That's Daniel, happy to discuss doing a future session on that one as well. Today's session is really going to just be, after I just do the introduction and objectives, an overview on generative AI for any newcomers, so basic concepts and future direction. And then I'm going to get right into it. This is something I didn't get into too much detail in my last session, but prompt engineering, basic concepts and strategies, this tool called custom instructions in ChatGPT, and really how you can kind of personalize the ChatGPT experience. And then advanced techniques and live examples around a technique that I use quite often called expert guidance. And then we're going to do a live example using both ChatGPT and Midjourney to produce a marketing campaign. I really want this to be tangible for everyone and hope you walk away with some good like knowledge out of this and some good templates that you can use to 10x your productivity. It does take time and it does take iteration. So that's the name of the game. Like anything, you just got to practice. This session will be focused on text generation and image generation. But of course, I teach courses in code generation, audio generation, and there's exciting new capabilities around multimodal generation, which are going to be introduced towards the latter part of the year, which I will be doing a course on as well. All the images you see in this presentation, at least for the most part, are AI generated, and I'm going to teach you how to, at a basic level, how to create some of these today. So I think that this whole wave of new AI, generative AI, is really kind of sparked when ChatGPT launched in November 2022, fastest growing application in history, and it really is the day when I think AI became useful, November 30th, 2022. But AI has been 8 decades in the making. The very paper that sort of like the algorithm that powers ChatGPT, the large language model and the transformer architecture, was actually published by Google in 2017. So this has been like a long time in the making. It just became useful in 2022, and that's why we're all excited and want to know the possibilities. So really, what is generative AI? The basics of the basics. Everybody has different definitions. This is actually Google's definition. So a type of artificial intelligence that creates new content based on what it has learned from existing content. The process of learning from existing content is called training and results in the creation of a statistical model. And when you give it an input, like in ChatGPT, generative AI uses that statistical model to predict what an expected response might be, and that generates new content. So a large language model, which is, again, what specifically powers ChatGPT, understands connections between text. And all it's doing, it's not sentient or anything. All it's doing is it's predicting the next word over and over again. And these are probability machines. And the more data they're trained on, the more examples it has, the more likely it's going to produce a next word that is pleasing and more general based on what you ask. Just to give you an idea on the types of data that GPT-3 was trained on, we're now at GPT-4, which is the gold standard in large language models. Really, it's a lot of common crawl data, Reddit, Wikipedia, this sort of thing. So just to give you an idea of the examples that these models are pre-trained on, it is a lot of this data. And of course, there are many types of models, both centralized and decentralized models. I'm particularly excited about the open source community. My team and I have played around with most of these models, and they're accessible to anybody. So you can train and fine tune your own models and put them into production, or you can leverage an API provided by OpenAI, Anthropic, Cohere, Google. They all have pretty sophisticated models that they're advancing using a lot of compute power, GPUs, mostly from NVIDIA. So the thing to note, and again, why we're all here, is that we're at the beginning of the next platform shift. And there are platform shifts that existed before this: mobile internet, desktop, PC server. I lived through the internet and the mobile internet ones, and this is the same thing as the previous ones, only bigger. Data is going to fuel everything that touches any industry and any use case in the future. And intelligence is the new capability that is general purpose and will become more valuable over time. So my thesis is by 2030, the world will have access to broad-based intelligence, and every person on the planet with a smart device will have access to an intelligent chief of staff. This chief of staff or multiple chiefs of staffs will book our flights, prioritize our meetings, give us career advice, plan everything for us. They'll educate our kids. And I think that we all need to prepare for a world where this is possible, where we don't have to write emails anymore because our chief of staffs will. So we all need to prepare for this. There's no stopping it, in my opinion. All you can do is really embrace it. And the more you understand it, the more you'll learn to embrace and adapt. And that's what I'm here to do, really to teach the skills of the future, which brings me to today's theme, which is, the language of language models, and that is prompt engineering. So what is a prompt? A prompt is the text that goes into a language model. And prompt engineering is the art of writing text to get the language model to do what you want it to do. The exciting thing is, and the thing to keep in mind on the possibilities is these models are going beyond text. Like you can input audio, image, text, and combinations of those to get an output of any one of those formats. So they're becoming multimodal in nature. But this particular session is focused mostly on text generation via ChatGPT. This is my structure of a prompt. It has 4 elements. One is context, instruction, input, and output indicator. Most people today just focus on the input. They input something and they expect a response. But for providing context, defining who the model is and what they should focus on, a specific instruction to focus on, and an output indicator, a format to format the output into, whether it be a table, bullet points, code, whatever the case may be, does create more consistent results. And if you structure, you can reuse these prompts over and over again, especially if they're instilled in code, which is essentially what I do. But these prompts or these prompt templates are especially useful in ChatGPT and Midjourney as well, which we'll go through today. So an example is an element of the prompt is a simple input to discuss the benefits and limitations of utilizing generative AI. And I asked for it in 3 bullet points per category. And that's the result I got. Benefits of utilizing AI, generative AI, and limitations. And it did a pretty good job, like no issue with this. But just to give you an example of what a more robust prompt will do for you, providing context. You are an OpenAI researcher focusing on generative AI models. The instructions is to get the advantages and limitations of generative AI models. And you'll notice in the input, I specifically asked for categories, 3 categories: creativity and novelty, efficiency and scalability, and data requirements. And in the output, I asked for a table with very, very specific columns. And it did exactly what I wanted it to do. So what these 2 slides really are meant to demonstrate is that you can get really creative on kind of providing the model instructions, context, and output indicators to get exactly what you want, so that you can cut and paste this and really put this in your decks or send it via email, etc. The whole point of this is so you have to do less work. And it really matters on the types of instructions you provide the model, the context, in order to get what you want. So I'm sure everyone's familiar that you can use ChatGPT and these tools like Bard on various tasks. I'm going to be touching on quite a few of these today, including how to leverage ChatGPT to generate your own prompts. I certainly don't write my prompts. I use a prompt to generate prompts, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that today, as well as other things like information extraction, document comparison. We'll go through some of those use cases right now. So basic strategies and techniques. These are the most basic strategies: 0-shot learning, 1-shot learning, and few-shot learning. 0-shot learning is asking a question to the model and basically getting an output on its pre-trained data. 1-shot learning is providing one example of the format you want it in, and few-shot learning is providing multiple examples. And I'm going to provide you examples for each of these. So 0-shot learning, what is the capital of Australia? The pre-trained data already contains the answer here, so you get the answer pretty easily. But for something like this, where you want a formatted date, one-shot learning is useful, where the instruction is convert the following formatted date to a corresponding format, and you provide the format in the output indicator to get what you want. Again, what this is really useful for is when you instill this type of prompt in code, input a CSV file with data in one format to convert it in a completely different format. That's essentially what I use it for. And again, that's covered in a more advanced session. Few-shot learning, same thing. You provide context, in this case, on English idioms. So break a leg means good luck. Bite the bullet means face a difficult or unpleasant situation. And you basically instruct it to provide other inputs and their associated idioms. So in this input, the ball is in your court and barking up the tree provides these idioms in a nice table. And again, this is really useful if you instill it in code so that you can kind of input hundreds of these or thousands of these where needed and get the output in seconds. And of course, if I change the output indicator in this, again, interchange that pretty easily. Everything else is the same. I can get that in code. So this is where interchanging segments and portions of the elements are very useful. So I'm going to walk through a ChatGPT capability called custom instructions. And this is my custom instruction. So I specifically, just going to go to ChatGPT for a second. And you can access it right here where it says custom instructions. And as you can see, I instruct the first one is really kind of thought starters. You know, where are you based? What do you do for work? What are your hobbies? What are your goals? I provide the first one, which is, you know, how would you like ChatGPT to respond, or what do you want it to know about you? I want it to be my strategic advisor and coach, achieving my goals with my business. And I specifically ask it to behave in a particular way. I ask it to leverage a technique called expert guidance and a set of project managers to assist me. And then I provide context on my business. And then the style in which I want it to respond, this is more of an advanced technique, which I can walk through in the Q&A if needed. But I actually leverage a technique called expert guidance, which I'll go through on a next slide. And I get ChatGPT to deploy a project manager and a series of expert managers to help me get what I want done. So as simple, I have a new chat window open with ChatGPT 4 enabled. This is the paid version. I can simply ask, can you restate my objectives, please? And it basically understands, because of those custom instructions, exactly what I want to achieve. And that just gives you an idea what custom instructions does. And it allows you to personalize ChatGPT. So just wanted everybody to understand that. And I'm happy to walk through this to you in the Q&A. So my ChatGPT, when I demonstrate it, is going to behave in that way moving forward. So let's go through one particular strategy that I really like, which is expert guidance. It's giving the time for the model to think. It's providing explicit guidance on how it should behave. And let's go through an example that I think is relevant to a lot of startups that are raising capital. So oftentimes, when I'm raising capital, I receive something from counsel, and it's related to board composition in this case. And I want to know how standard this clause is compared to the standards out there. So there is a standard document in the VC world where you can get that and compare that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you exactly kind of how to go about comparing this. So I've developed a prompt. This is a prompt where the context is you are an expert legal advisor with extensive knowledge on the NVCA, which are the standard venture capital documents in the United States. And this technique called expert guidance provides step-by-step instructions on identifying key components, analyzing each component, summarize the overall differences, and presenting your findings in tabular format. The output asks for it in table form with specific columns. And then essentially all you need to do really is put in the standard clause and put in the provided clause. And I'm going to demonstrate that for you right now. So open up a new chat. So I'm going to cut this, paste that, and then I'm going to take the standard version, paste it right there, and then I'll take this version, paste it right there. And again, these are meant to be completely reusable. So, I could really input anything in there and create this prompt to be as generic as possible. Again, I have a project manager that summarizes the task, and then he deploys a legal expert to essentially perform the task for me. So it auto-generated this legal expert. That's my custom instruction. That's what I wanted it to do. And then it basically does what I want it to do. It creates a table and it breaks down the specific standard and the input and compares them and outlines the critical differences, as I said. There was one thing in this particular clause that I know is a little bit different. Yep, the 70% threshold on common shares, and it did identify that. And then it does a nice summary for me at the end on things to consider. Potential risks. There you go. And it outlined that 70% threshold, which is out of the standard. Great. So another example that I'll run through is a sentiment analysis. This is one that we use quite often because we get a lot of customer feedback from across our network of customers. We get a lot of text feedback on ratings. So without expert guidance, this is what I got, right? So I basically inputted that in this and I got that. But with expert guidance, I was able to get something much more robust. So like, again, I modified this to focus on sentiment, and I just put that Amazon review in the input. And what it did for me is it broke this down into kind of very specific segments, and it analyzed the identified emotion and the intensity of each emotion across this. This is very helpful because this can be used as label data for future use. But again, expert guidance, again, these steps are just very important in being able to kind of ensure that it iterates through these steps and comes up with something much more detailed and consistent. And what I've noticed with expert guidance is that it's much more consistent in providing you a result that you want if you reuse it over and over again. All right. So that was expert guidance. And now I'm going to walk you through a live demo of image and text creation. So what we're going to do right now is a campaign generation workflow where we're going to automate the development of text copy for a marketing campaign and the design, so the image generation for a marketing campaign using OpenAI and Midjourney. Of course, these other tasks like create the marketing brief, research the concept, review for final approval and launch, a lot of these can be also automated through, to some extent, through ChatGPT and various tools, but we're going to focus on the creative process. So it usually starts with a brief from your manager, right? So you're at work, and in this case, Nick, who's our manager, wants an auto loan campaign created. And he's provided the necessary details. He wants an email campaign and a social media campaign on Instagram. He's provided the necessary sizes. He's provided content templates. He's provided the brand guidelines and various other things to get started. So he's provided these brand assets, and essentially our job is to create content for these templates, which he's provided as well. Usually this is what I've always gotten in a marketing campaign, and I've been asked to fill them in. It's quite a lot of work to fill in, come up with the text and the images to be able to kind of create something that is a development of an output. But with generative AI, with tools like OpenAI and Midjourney, you can do this quite easily. So this is the prompt that I used, and this is the output that I got. Now, I don't write these prompts from scratch. What I'm really going to walk you through is how to leverage this prompt right here to create a prompt. So essentially, I leverage this prompt to develop this prompt. And what I did was, if I go back to ChatGPT, you'll see that I went here and I inputted that prompt, right? And essentially what it did is, you'll notice that in the prompt template, there is no input. And the reason is, if you read this prompt, I instruct it to ask me for the input. So, your first response will be to ask what the prompt should be about. I will provide you with my answer. So essentially, no input is required because the input comes in the first step, right? So it asks for the input, right? What should the prompt be about? And then all I did was I cut and paste this right here. That's what you see here, the brief. And then I cut and paste the template. So this is my template that I had above in terms of the format that I wanted to. And then it produced the output for me, right? And I iterated on a few times. The output indicator wasn't in table format, as you can see, right? So I asked for it in table format. It made the revision for me in table format. And I was happy with that. So what I did was, then I took that prompt, I just copied it and I pasted it over here. Okay. And essentially my project manager and the advisor that they deployed, a prompt engineer, gave me a table with all of the content I need to fill in, including image recommendations. And I wasn't really happy with the image recommendation that it came up with out of the box. It asked for a piggy bank. So I actually said I wanted like a lush money tree, with an open safe, and it revised it for me. So essentially what that did for me is it got me to a point where I was able to kind of input the text for these things pretty easily. So I know that was a lot, but during the Q&A, I'd be happy to answer that and walk through more specific examples of that, as we'll have time during the networking. So just to point out, you can reduce the amount of work you do in developing prompts by using the master prompt that generates all prompts, which is this. And Daniel, I'll make sure to provide this template so that everybody can start using it. This in itself has saved me hours and days of time because I don't need to sit there writing these long prompts anymore. I just, use ChatGPT to create the prompts. Okay, so that's the image portion of it, where we've developed the image. Now we got to go to the images. So essentially, I use a tool called Midjourney. Many of you may have used it. Just go to midjourney.com and you can sign up for it. And essentially, what I use is a specific prompt template, which generates images for me. And again, this is just a template, and it's a template that's meant to generate any image. So you are a Midjourney prompt generator, and I'd like you to fill in the blanks enclosed in this and this. So what is this? This is the brief. This is the image that I want, as you can see in the input, and the curly braces are the style that I want. So for any image that I want to create, all I really need to input is what image that I want and what style I want it in. And what it does is it fills in all of these blanks with either the style or what the image should be. So if we go back to this, as you can see, the image recommendation was a lush money tree over here, right? All I did was I put in my trusty template in there. And as you can see in the brief, I used the prompt template to generate a Midjourney prompt of a lush money tree from an open safe. And I asked for a water style input. And essentially it said this, it deployed a content strategist as an advisor, and it generated the prompt for me. I didn't like the amount of detail it gave me in the water style and in the color. So I said, provide more details. It provided that right here. And then I asked for the entire prompt again, which is this. So this is the entire prompt. And I can continue to iterate on this. As I said, like, iteration is critical to this. Even if I don't like one part of this, I'll sort of like iterate to get what I want. So all I need to do there is copy. And I'm in Midjourney right now. Midjourney is accessible via a tool called Discord. Many of you may use Discord. And as you can see, I can basically type this command called imagine in there. I input the prompt. And what you can do with Midjourney is specify a specific size you want it as well. So in this one, I use an aspect ratio of 1080 by 560, which was specified in the brief. (1080 by 560). And away Midjourney goes. So let me walk you through how to really utilize Midjourney to the full capacity. It usually takes like a few seconds in order to generate like a Midjourney result that you can see here, starting to produce it. And Midjourney always produces 4 examples to begin with, but you can see the aspect ratio is correct. It's 1080 by 560. If you don't specify an aspect ratio, it's just 1 by 1 or 1080 by 1080, so it's a square. All right. So this is what I got. Not bad, right? So essentially what Midjourney allows you to do, and they've done this really intelligently because every time I click on one of these, it's feedback data for them to improve their model. But U is upscale. Upscale just allows you to select 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 to select which one you want a bigger version of, high resolution version. V means variation. V means, okay, you know what? I like this one, let's say number 1, but I want to see some variation. So let's just try that. So I'll click on V1. In my previous go, this is what I got. And that's the other thing to note. You're not always going to get the same thing every time. So you got to be a little bit flexible in terms of, what it is that you get, and you got to iterate on it. Sometimes I'll get an image and I'll iterate on it maybe 8, 10 times to get what I want. And sometimes it means modifying the prompt, going back here and going back to your image creation thing and saying, hey, and modifying this. And all you need to do is provide an instruction to modify this. Too much green. I want more blue in it. Please modify the style. And it'll literally, you don't have to instruct it anymore. It'll provide a new prompt and you can input that new prompt. So let's revise the color description to be more prominent in blues. Sometimes you need to instruct it to develop the new prompt again, but it did in this case. The project manager was quote unquote smart enough to do that. Okay, here's what I got. So I got a few variations of this. And I kind of like this one on the top, right? So I can upscale it. There you go. So that's kind of like it. There's a couple of other options when you upscale. You can vary strong or very subtly. Very strong will sort of like completely like just take another stab at it. Very subtle will kind of change the subtleties if there's certain styles and you want to revise. 2x and 1.5x zooms are available, and they're adding new tools over the time like panning. So we can kind of go very strong here. I'll also save this one. All you need to do is click on it, open a browser. I usually right click and click save image, save it to my folder. And the other thing I'll show you while we wait for that, you can run multiple ones as well, is this tool called Blend. So when you click on Blend, what I'll do is I'll select the example that I just saved. So that's this one. And I'll input the color palette as well. So the color palette that Nick, our manager, provided, I'll put that in too. And this is just a way of saying to the model, hey, I want certain styles in that particular color or brand assets. So there you go. That's the upscale result. Sorry, this is the variation, strong variation result. And sometimes it'll produce better results and you'll just kind of run with it. As you can see, this one's producing the blended versions, producing a new version here using the brand guidelines. Some of them are going to come up. So it's really important that you format the image of the brand guidelines in a good way. I didn't particularly format it too well, but some of these are not bad. They're not amazing. But as you can see, because I had the brand assets as a square, it's kind of using it as a square. So you're going to kind of want to play around kind of the format and the style your brand assets are formatted in. But as you can see, it followed the colors that I wanted. When I did this in my own time, I'll just walk you through this because I do want to save time for Q&A. This is what I started with. So I used that one in particular. And then for the social one, I asked for a bit of it. I asked for a money stack. That's what the image recommendation was. I got this. And then I tried something different. I modified the prompt to do something different. So I stuck with that one. But then I inputted the brand assets and I ended up getting something like this. So it matched that. So that's sort of kind of like my lesson. And I wanted to make sure that I know that was a pretty quick sort of run through on it. There's a lot of details to understand. So hopefully I can answer some of those in the Q&A on wherever the audience is curious. Before we get to Q&A, Daniel, I want to kind of share that, what's coming later this year is multimodal capabilities. So the ability to input, like, for example, an image in an audio file and getting an image. In this case, it's an image of a bird and audio of a motor revving. You get an image of someone riding a motorcycle with birds around them, or an audio input of penguins to get a generated image of penguins. So I want everybody to expand their mind beyond just text and beyond just images in separate environments. In this case, OpenAI and Midjourney. This is all going to come together. So start to open up your minds on the possibilities that are going to be available to us just months from now that aren't available today. So in the next course, we'll be focused on multimodal prompt engineering, generating that project manager and expert agents. That's takes probably like 20 or 30 minutes to explain how to do that. And then really the most value will come to you if you can kind of take APIs tied to these and embed it in your processes. That's kind of what I do. And that's where I've seen beyond 10x improvement, because you can actually take APIs and some of these capabilities, such as the document comparison capability or the sentiment analysis capability, and really embed it in your workflows. So that's it, Daniel. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll still share my screen so we can walk through some of the slides while I answer questions during the networking.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Saroop. Folks, if you loved what Saroop is saying, show him some love. You have the emojis right at the bottom of your screen. Awesome, awesome. A ton of hearts. Awesome. All right, so Saroop, let's kind of get into some of the questions. We have a couple here, so I won't spend a ton of time here because we do also have to go into the networking. So to start things off, we have a question from Sabrina. Let me just bring this up on screen very briefly. She asks, outputs change as historical models are updated despite using prompt templates. So this makes for replicability issues or general inconsistency. How do we think about this?
Yeah, I would say she's 100% right. As models change, the outputs are going to, I would say, change, but I would say improve. So, again, the prompts that you use today may need to adapt as the models improve. Like if you use one of my prompts, like the expert guidance in GPT-3 versus GPT-4, you're going to see a significant difference. That said, within the same model, let's say GPT-4 or GPT 3.5, if you use something like expert guidance, what I've found is you do get more consistent results. You're not always going to get the same results, so there needs to be some adaptability there. And for certain use cases, that may not be good. But what I've found is in most cases, if you use techniques like expert guidance and ones with more context and instruction, you will get more consistent results.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so moving on, we have this question from YMDR Marketing. Are all AI images cartoonish in nature? My brand uses more lifestyle images, stock photos, so I haven't been able to use image capabilities as much.
No, actually, it's all dependent on the style that you specify, right? So in my prompts, if you recall, like I had the style input, I just happen to use more like watercolor cartoonish styles in my marketing campaigns, but you can definitely use like statements like hyper realistic and it'll produce hyper realistic images. So it's not constrained to a particular style. It's all about what style you specify. And the reason why I developed my prompt like that is so that you can specify a specific style and then it'll automatically fill it in within those curly braces. So in your case, you'll probably want to specify hyper realistic in a lot of your style inputs because that'll sort of sway it away from more cartoonish watercolor styles that I have and into more of a hyper realistic image. So it is all about structuring your prompts in a way where you have that flexibility.
Yeah, and from my experience, whenever I've kind of played around with Midjourney, and if I want a picture that's more photorealistic, I've mentioned, I'll pick a camera and I'll pick, a lens model and all of that, and I'll enter that into the prompt. And I feel like that kind of has an impact as well.
Yep. I'd say one more thing to everyone. The most important thing you can do and take away from this session is the prompt that creates prompt for both text and images. Now you have the ability to input that into ChatGPT and continually reuse that, right? Because that prompt is going to be saved. So by just talking and iterating through that prompt, you can sort of practice and sort of understand the differences in inputting one style format versus another one in seconds. And you continue to iterate that. Eventually, you'll get an idea very quickly, actually, you'll get an idea of where the model is consistent and what you need to specify in order to ensure consistency.
Awesome. So yeah, we have a question from Allison, and maybe this kind of goes into how large corporations use AI. The question is, how do you think about privacy when choosing which LLMs to leverage?
Yeah, that's a challenge with Midjourney because again, like with Midjourney, you're not necessarily inputting your data. You're in some cases you're inputting maybe the brief of a marketing campaign or whatever. But like I'd say that it's more of a creative exercise with Midjourney. But again, like your data is not protected if you are inputting it in Midjourney. With ChatGPT, look, there's a particular, and again, this is all about how much you trust like these providers. But in ChatGPT, you can kind of put a setting on here, data controls, where if you turn chat history and training off, your data won't be used or any data won't be used for model retraining. But the only downside there is you don't have a saved chat, right? And the saved chat is actually a really useful feature. Now, the way that I use it, I typically don't use ChatGPT as the interface. I use the API. And the terms of service on the API share that data is only retained for 30 days, but it's not used for model retraining. It's retained for abuse monitoring purposes. Or you can revert to an open model, right? So there's various options here. But I think the very least you can do is turn this setting off if you're in a corporate setting. Now, ChatGPT does have an enterprise model where they don't retain your data. So if that's something that you'd see beneficial to your organization, talk to your IT department or your senior leadership, and they could certainly look into that. I also offer a solution which has zero data retention policies, if that's helpful as well.
Awesome. So we have a question here from Xavier. All right, and maybe you could kind of talk about open source and using APIs as well, maybe like the pros and cons here. From Xavier, is it expensive to deploy an open source LLM on your own server, or is it cheaper than using APIs like ChatGPT and Bard?
I would say that it's a heavy workload to deploy an open source model into production. If you're building a prototype and you're like fine tuning or, performing some sort of like reinforcement learning on it. Look, it can get expensive to do that depending on how much data you're working with. But again, like, that's your model or your customer's model. And that's something that, you don't have to worry about your data being exposed. I would say that the centralized models are much easier to use and they're getting cheaper over time. And they're definitely more powerful. But again, these are trade-offs that we have to deal with, right? With open models, you have to maintain them. You have to constantly upgrade them as new versions come out. Open models are always going to be one or two generations behind the closed models. So I think it's more of an assessing the trade-offs and understanding kind of between those trade-offs of what's more important, right? Is having full control and data privacy and various other things more important, or is speed more important? Is cost more important? Is just an easy solution with not a lot of maintenance important? So you really have to weigh out those trade-offs depending on your organization and the use cases you're executing on.
Yeah. So with that, I want to kind of go into our last question, and I do want to expand on this question a little bit as well, right? So the question here is it true that Chat GPT-4's performance has dropped in recent months? And I just want to kind of add to this, as a user of generative AI, right? What are some good practices to deploy when you think about quality assurance, right?
Like quality assurance in terms of, sorry, can you clarify the question, Daniel? Just elaborate a little
Yeah,
bit.
so in terms of the output that you're getting, right, as as the human benefit, right, what are some steps that you should be taking to make sure that the you know whatever's generated through the prompt is something that you can use properly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that like, everybody needs to instill a step in the process when leveraging these models. Sure, it saves you a lot of time, but I think critical thinking on what the output is and questioning everything, not taking necessarily for face value, is a necessary step we all need to get educated on and instill in our process. Because while these models and these capabilities are going to save us a tremendous amount of time, I think like us being humans in the loop to ensure that uh, it can get us 80 to 90% there, but that last 10% is so important in ensuring that the quality of that output and the editing of that output before it gets into production is necessary, which is challenging for some automation use cases, right? So you almost need to be selective in terms of what you automate on full autopilot versus ones where you have a human in the loop assessing the output before it goes into productions. Now, something like some of the times it's not going to matter, right? Like some marketing campaigns are developed and there's a lot of flexibility on generating the image or the text. Some outputs need to be very specific and almost like can be scrutinized if the output is wrong. And in those use cases, you really have to kind of like assess, can we achieve full automation or not? For us, like, in my industry, I have mapped out about 75 use cases that are available. We're executing on 3 right now. And the way we selected those 3 were it's like low risk, low effort, high impact use cases. So when you go through your use case prioritization exercise, it's really, really important to start with the ones that are lower risk, lower effort, high impact. Get started with those, get some wins under your belt, and then move on to more higher stakes use cases. That's my approach, and that's actually worked really well for us and our customers.
Awesome, awesome. I think that was a really, really great answer. And with that, we are done with our Q&A. Thank you, folks, for sticking around, taking part in this. So we had, at one point, I believe, over 350 people live here with us. So I think it's safe to say that the folks enjoyed it. Saroop, thank you so much for joining us here today. And before we kind of conclude and have Saroop's closing remarks, just to let you all know, you'll receive all the slides and resources and a recording of this session within 48 hours in your inbox. Saroop, before we close out and head over to the networking, any closing remarks?
No, thanks for having me as usual. Like Daniel, what I'll say is there's just so much to know about this, and usually an hour is not enough time. I hope this gave everyone a high level on what the possibilities are and that it goes beyond just an input. But again, like, future sessions will get into much more detail in terms of how to get closer to really creating impact in your workflows.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you want to join another FI event, please do check out fi.co/events. We'll see you in the next one.